Yo, what's up guys? Welcome to part 2 of my 3-part series detailing why my channel is named Basque-Icelandic Pigeon. Last week we took a look at the Basque language, and today we're going to answer the question, what in the world is Icelandic? Icelandic is a Norse language spoken on this island in the North Atlantic called Island, though the locals prefer to pronounce it Island, meaning land of ice, hence the English name, Iceland. I want to just go ahead and dispel a rumor you might have heard about Iceland's name. It is often said that when the Vikings arrived in Iceland and Greenland, they named the greener and more inhabitable one Iceland, and the icier and less inhabitable one Greenland, in order to trick other potential settlers. Alas, this is only half true. The first Vikings to arrive in Iceland came from the north, landing near giant glaciers and icy fjords. They didn't know at the time that Iceland actually has some green to it. Even before settling on the name Iceland, the original name for the island was Snæland, or Snowland. While Iceland may have some green, snow and ice are pretty common occurrences. Greenland, on the other hand, was a bit of a publicity stunt. The first Viking to discover it, Eric the Red, was pretty desperate to have other settlers show up, so he gave it an appealing name. Of course, most Greenlanders don't actually call it that. In Greenlandic, the name is Kalalit Nunaat, or Land of the Kalalit. Like the rest of the Norse languages, Icelandic is descended from the language of the Vikings, Old Norse, which was written in runes. There are runic inscriptions in Iceland dating back to the 10th century, and were written in this alphabet, Younger Futhark. There's actually a letter here that still exists in Icelandic today. This one, Thurs, which became the modern Icelandic Thorn. Speaking of runes, let me tell y'all a thing or two about Bluetooth. Despite the modernity of the technology, it's actually named after the 900s King of Denmark, Harald Bluetooth, who unified Denmark and Norway, just like Bluetooth unifies different devices. In fact, the logo for Bluetooth is actually a combination of the runes for Harald's initials, Hagat and Björk. Pretty cool. What about Icelandic's alphabet now? It actually uses the Latin alphabet, or a severely modified Latin alphabet. They got rid of C, Q, W, and Z and added a bunch of weird letters. Let's start with the only letter in Icelandic with an umlaut, and is considered to be a separate letter from which is in turn a different letter from O. Which brings us to all these. These are not to be confused with the accents in languages like Spanish, where it just indicates emphasis. In fact, in Icelandic, the emphasis is always on the first syllable. Instead, these are their own letters with their own pronunciations. We've got A and ow, E and ye, I and e, A and o, and and u. Icelandic has also got this character, I. In English, we actually used to have this, and it was called ash, since it's derived from a rune that literally just meant an ash tree. Speaking of letters that used to be in English, Icelandic also has ev and thorn. These are both dental fricatives, which in English we represent with the th. But in Icelandic they do make different sounds. Ev is voiced and pronounced th. Thorn is voiceless and pronounced th. It can be a bit hard to differentiate for English speakers, I say as if I don't speak English too, because in English we don't really have a distinction between these two sounds. However, in English there are a few examples where we distinguish between these two sounds. Take for example the noun mouth. This is pronounced with the voiceless dental fricative th. However, the verb mouth is pronounced with the voiced dental fricative th. This is an example of a minimal pair, or a pair of words where the only difference is one sound, where changing the sound changes the meaning of the word. This proves that th and th are different phonemes in English, if only in a few cases. But what happened to ev and thorn in English? One word, the printing press. Wait, that's 3 words. Well, anyway, by the time the printing press had been invented, ev had already been entirely replaced by thorn, which was used for both the voiced and voiceless dental fricative. But the typesets imported from Belgium and the Netherlands didn't have a thorn, so instead people used the Y. This is actually what gave us stuff like ye olde, though it wasn't actually pronounced like that. You see, it was still thought of as thorn, and the E was actually silent, so ye olde would have actually just been pronounced the old. But anyways, back to Icelandic. For the most part, pronunciation is like in English, but with some key exceptions. For example, J's are pronounced ya. That's why it's Reykjavik and not Reykjavik. Another is that they roll their R's, like in Spanish. But probably the weirdest thing is the H. You see, it's usually pronounced exactly like the H in English, except for when it's in front of a V. Then it's pronounced like a K, making it kv. In my opinion, the hardest to pronounce sound in Icelandic is that made by two L's, tl. Take for example the name of the largest glacier in Iceland, Vatnajökull. The Jökull part just means glacier. In my last video, I talked about how Basque really likes its compound words. Icelandic, on the other hand, is more like its cousin German. It likes to just keep on adding words together until you've got stuff like Eyjafjallajökull, or Island Mountain Glacier, as well as Murgæs, the Icelandic word for penguin, which literally translates to fat goose. Though this has nothing on the Mandarin word for penguin, business goose. Very connected to Icelandic's love for compound words is its distaste for foreign loanwords. In English, when a new word is introduced to us, we often take it as it is, not changing anything, even keeping the diacritics. But in Icelandic, they like to make new words, or neologisms, made of compounds of words that already exist in Icelandic. For example, when Benjamin Franklin invented electricity, not really, the Icelanders coined rafmagn, or amber power. This isn't as silly as it sounds though, as our word for electricity, comes from the Greek elektron, meaning amber. As for basic vocabulary in Icelandic, we've got hi and halo, hi and hello, bless, which means bye, and is a shortening of vertu blessaður, or be blessed. We've got vinsamlegast, please, takk, thank you, og, and, góðan daginn, good morning, velkomin, welcome, já, yes, nay, no, ein, one, tver, two, and thrir, three. To show you guys an example of a basic conversation in Icelandic, I'm going to call up my friend, Basque-Icelandic Dufa. Once again, I don't have any bananas, so we're just going to have to make do. Ring, 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 ring. Hi, hvernig hefur þú það? Frábært, en þú? Ekki frábært. Hvaðan ertu? Ertu frá Reykjavík? Nei, ég frá Akureyri. Flott. Hvað heitir þú? Ég heiti Jökull Jökullsson. Bless, bless. While English and Icelandic are related, they are both Germanic languages after all, I have a feeling the only word most of y'all understood there was hi. But there are quite a few words that the languages have in common, like brother, sister, father, and mother. In addition, the words for son and daughter are pretty similar, and Icelandic has a tendency of naming people after their parents, which is why most people who live there have last names like Jonsson or Guðmundsdóttir. There are also words in English with origins in Old Norse, since the Vikings had a tendency of invading England. In general, if a word starts with ska, it probably comes from Old Norse. For example, take skyscraper. Both sky and scraper come from Old Norse. So if the Vikings had invented the skyscraper before John Skyscraper in 1885, they probably would have given it a similar name. Are there any words in English that specifically come from Icelandic? Yup. One example is skyr. This is a type of Icelandic yogurt that is absolutely delicious. It is also the namesake of skýrgámur, or skýrgobbler, one of the 13 Yule lads, little men that come to bully kids during Christmas. But that's for another video. But I have a feeling most of you don't use the word skier every day. But there are two common words in English that do come from Icelandic, saga and geyser. Geyser just comes from Geysir, which is a specific hot spring in Iceland, of which they have hundreds. The Geysir geyser isn't really that active anymore and hasn't erupted in 9 years, but the nearby Strókur erupts every 7 minutes, so people tend to go to that one. As for the word saga, it comes from the Icelandic sagas, or Íslendingasögur. These account the history and genealogy of early Icelandic settlers. My personal favorite is Grettir saga, or the saga of Grettir the Strong. Us getting our word saga from the names of these works is like if we got our word for a long and arduous journey from the name of a guy who took 20 years to travel 560 nautical miles. Oh wait. Well, I hope you all liked the video and maybe even learned something. And if any of y'all watching are on the Iceland Tourism Board, call me. I could use a sponsor. Stay tuned for part 3, where we dive into the question, what is a pigeon? Or more accurately, what is a pigeon? Have a nice day! Og vertu blessaður!